Hello, my friend, and welcome to Beyond, the personal growth podcast for the people who are healing beyond their conditioning and beyond the cycles that played out before them. My name is Katie Lynn, and with 20 years of experience in the field of psychology and human behavior, I am bringing my natural curiosity, expertise, and personal life experiences here for discussions that are guaranteed to be informative, inspiring, and entertaining. I'm glad you're here. Let's get started. Hello and happy 4th of July. By the time you hear this, technically it will be July 5th, but I'm recording this on the 4th and we just got home from a wholesome hometown parade. If you don't know, I am a hometown gal, okay? I went away for college and came right back for my master's degree and I haven't left since. As we were enjoying the parade, spending time with family and watching the motorcycles and all of the floats go by, my husband and I started to explore this concept of the 1%. Both of us got up early this morning before the parade and went to the gym for a workout. And our trainer brought up this idea that we've never been here before, meaning that where we are in life, specifically with my husband and I, we've never experienced this. You know, we're going to new levels of health. We're going to new levels of business. We're going to new levels of service and lifestyle. And as we consider the trajectory that we would like to be on, this idea of the top 10% comes up, and then the top 1%, and then the top 1% of the 1%, right? It's a way that our brains like to think about accomplishment and service and impact, and really to live into the type of humans that explore our potential with great intention. So as we're driving home from the parade, I turn to my husband and I look at him and I go, babe, how would you know if you've made it into this 1% of 1% club, metaphorically, right? And I'm thinking of this within the context of admissions and groups, especially as we consider high schools now for our oldest and we're looking ahead. Some high schools you just get into. There's no application process. The prerequisite is you exist and you say you want to go there and then you go there. And then there are other high schools where there are prerequisites. You need letters of recommendations from certain people. You need certain test exam scores. You need a certain level of community service. So there are these different standards. And I'm thinking about our identity and who we have been as individuals and who we've been as a couple within the context of our standards. Sanika and I have always been ambitious people. We've always been in the leadership space. We've been in the coaching space for a very long time. I looked at him and I said, I just wonder what would be required. What would we need to be able to say that we have achieved, created, and provided in order for that metaphorical magic door to open into the 1%. And the question is ironic in and of itself, because at the end of the day, there is no magical 1% door. There's no door on the planet that you go knock on it and you show your credentials and then they let you in. So the standard of what it would be to be the 1% is essentially created by us. We started to talk about specifics. I am a big fan of specificity. And if you are familiar with the power process, you know that the first line of the power process is situation, and the directions for that line are to be specific. How specific can you get? And specificity is fantastic because it brings along with it clarity. So if I say, I want a car, that is really vague. Right? If I tell God or the universe that I want a car, Lord knows what's going to show up in my experience, right? Like I have really no clear idea on how I go get a car So there's a lot of options. I think it leaves space for a lot of overwhelm. I think it leaves space for paralysis by analysis. It doesn't feel so empowering to me, and it doesn't feel so certain to me. It's like, I know I'll get a car, and it's going to be a Toyota. It's going to be a Lamborghini. Is it going to be a car that fits my lifestyle? Is it going to be a car that's new enough for me? Is it going to be a car with too many miles? Is it going to be a car that is in really poor condition? There's so many factors, right? Because of how vague that statement is of I want a car. Now, what I encourage myself to do, my clients to do, what Sanika and I started to do in this conversation is get really specific, really consider, okay, well, what would we use it for? And what would we want to experience with it? And what is our lifestyle? And is it realistic? And would we have a good time in a coupe with a drop top? And it's like, yeah, we would have a good time in a coupe with a drop top, but we got kids and we got kids in sports and we got kids that are busy, in extracurriculars, and we've got friends and we like family adventures, and a coupe with a drop top is going to really limit us in what we can do and with how much ease we can do that thing, right? So the specificity is really empowering because now we can take a look and be reflective and create more awareness around what we're looking for so that when it shows up, we can say yes. And it also empowers us so that when we go out into the world, when something else shows up that is not a match to our specific request, we can say no. For so long in my journey, I resisted specificity. I was just like, God, let me have more than enough, right? Let me have more than enough. Let me have a wonderful man. This was back when I was single. Let me have a wonderful man. I just really want a good man. And it's like, Katie, number one, you already have more than enough. And you always, thank God, have been blessed to have more than enough. And there are tons of wonderful men, right? There are so many, like the vagueness made it so that I didn't know what to say no to, and I didn't know what to say yes to. And the point that I want to make here is when we get specific, then we can be clear in our yes and in our no. And when we can be clear in our yes and our no, we actually move faster because we know how to basically filter everything in our experience. And we get to filter quickly what receives our attention and what doesn't, what receives our energy and what doesn't, because anything that is not a fit, right? Anything that is not a part of the specific outcome, the specific experience is a no. And it makes it so easy. It's like, I'm going to go out for sushi. If I drive by an Italian restaurant, I'm not stopping. If I drive by a chicken restaurant, I'm not stopping. If I drive by McDonald's, I'm not stopping. And it's easy to keep driving past those things. And I can keep a certain speed because I know I'm going for sushi. I'm really passionate about this because what happens in our journeys is we get distracted. And not only do we get distracted, but we kind of get sidetracked because when we are operating within the context of vague ideas or vague goals or very vague standards, or even worse, we're not aware of our standards, then anything can come along and we have this underlying anxiety about whether or not we say yes or no. Could it be? Could he be the one? Maybe he's the one. Maybe he's not the one. What if I'm not right? What if I'm losing out, right? The FOMO creeps in. The fear of missing out creeps in. The scarcity mentality creeps in. The questioning of self. Can I trust myself? Can I trust this judgment? And that creates the suffering that we actually don't have to experience in our journey. And that's the suffering that is really, it's not a productive suffering. It's like the way in which we create suffering for ourselves, and we don't have to. I do believe that there are circumstances that show up in our reality. There are situations that show up in our reality that are not ideal, that we must traverse because it's a part of our soul blueprint. And there's really not so much we can do about them, but control what we can control about ourselves as we navigate it. The suffering of like questioning ourselves and going back and forth with people who are not healthy for us, and saying yes when we mean no and saying no when we mean yes, all of that, I believe, can be mitigated, reduced, or completely gotten rid of by this idea of specificity that's rooted in self-awareness. When I know myself, I can be discerning because I know specifically what it is I am here to create, to say yes to experience. And that's a really big deal. And to me, that's a part of the thinking that gets to be installed when we decide that we're going to change our own lives. It's so funny. Yesterday, I received a beautiful photo from one of my good friends. She sent it to me, and it was a photo from 2017. And I look completely different from what I look like now. You would probably look at this photo and you'll probably see it at some point because I'll make a post about it. But you'll see this photo and you'll be like, whoa. When I saw it, my jaw was on the floor. And I'm so grateful that my friend sent me this photo because it was in 2017, I think. I remember that point in my life where I had been building my business. I was like doing well. I was single. I had, my oldest son was probably 3, maybe 4 at the time. I was going for it. The difference between that version of me and the version of me that sits here talking to you now is the thinking. The way that I think now is completely different. That's what I focus on in my own life and the work that I do with my clients. To me, every time I have met someone who is in the 1% of the 1%, they think differently. They don't see the world with the same interpretations as the majority of people do. And they ask different questions, and they really move with an inherent deep faith and trust in God. And they also move with a deep faith and trust that no matter what decision they make, they will create something wonderful from it. They really move from the perspective of everything that is in my reality, everything that comes my way, I leverage for me. I know how to leverage it for me. I would like to invite you to play with that today as you plan for your next evolution, as you consider changing your identity or growing in your identity, as you plan for new goals, or as you finally get the courage to go for that goal that you've been writing in your journal for the last 5 years. That was one of the things that was the tipping point for me. I realized I was going back through a Google Docs, cleaning out my drive, and it was like, dang, Katie, you've been writing this goal for the last 4 years. When are you going to do something about it? Obviously what you've been doing the last 4 years has not brought it to fruition. So what are you going to do differently? And maybe that's where you're at. And if that's where you're at, you're in a really powerful place. That goal hasn't left you yet because it's for you. It is tied to your soul. It is a part of your purpose. It is a part of your life story and what you're here to create. Let this be the 6 months. Let this be the year. Let this be the 3 years that you go for it. You center that goal and see how the process of bringing it to fruition changes you, and allow yourself to be changed. Allow yourself to be molded. That to me is what surrender is. Surrender is like, this is my goal. I know it is anointed by God for me because it's been in my journal for the last 5 years, right? I don't know about you, but anytime a new goal comes into my awareness, the prayer I say immediately is, God, if this is for me, I will pursue it. If it is not for me, remove it from my space immediately. And that is what happens. When something lingers that long in my awareness, it's like, okay, God is really waiting for me to take action on this. And I've been dragging my feet. So take action and let it mold you, let it develop you, let it refine you, because that is the whole point of this game. That's exactly why we're here. And what a pleasure. What a pleasure it is. I adore you. Share this with someone who needs it. Get specific. I dare you to go for it. As we complete this episode, I would love to know your insights, takeaways, and feedback. You can message me on Instagram at Katie Lynn Rojano or send them via email to katie@katielynnrojano.com. Any products or digital downloads I mentioned can be found via the link in my Instagram bio. If you enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to share it with at least one friend and leave a 5-star review so we can get these impactful dialogues into the lives of even more people. I would also like to thank my guest for their vulnerability and generosity in allowing us to learn from them and grow alongside them. Until next time, friends, let's go beyond.